What if I told you there's a cheat code to owning a business in Australia? A way to skip all the soul-crushing, high-risk parts of starting a business from scratch. And start making money with a name everyone already knows, like Gloria Jeans or Nando's or Donut King. It's the $100 billion dream called franchising, and it's sold to thousands of aspiring Aussie entrepreneurs every single year. It's the promise of a proven system, a business in a box, and a fast track to being your own boss. But what if the cheat code is a lie? What if the game is rigged? What if the entire system is designed for you to lose and still pay anyways, even while your dream is going up in flames? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on one of the biggest and most brutal industries in the country, maybe even the world. This is the harsh reality of franchising. So, how does this happen? Well, first, you have to understand the sales pitch. Because on paper, franchising sounds like the smartest, safest way to go into business. It's the golden ticket, a cheat code to success. So, you've got some cash ready to go and you decide you want to run your own business. But the cold, hard reality of starting from absolute zero is a nightmare. Suddenly, aside from being an owner, you're the chief marketer, the head of supply chain logistics, the menu testing guinea pig, and the social media manager, all while praying that your grand opening isn't also your grand closing. It's an uphill battle against brutal failure rates, and that fear can be paralyzing. And then, shimmering like an oasis in the desert of small business risk, the franchise opportunity appears. They sell it to you as a business in a box, a shortcut to success. For one hefty fee, they hand you the keys to a brand customers already know and love. The entire playbook is yours, all the secret recipes, the day-to-day operating manuals, and the whole supply chain. They promise professional training, a dedicated support team, and a massive nationwide marketing plan. Suddenly, the terrifying gamble of starting from scratch is replaced with the rock-solid security of a proven system, a business with a built-in safety net, all guided by a powerful parent company invested in your success. At least, that's the dream they sell you in the glossy brochure. From the franchisor's perspective, the ideal franchisee is often someone with passion and a life's savings, but limited industry experience. They're the perfect customer, hopeful, trusting, and willing to follow the rules to the letter, believing it's the only path to success. But for thousands of Australians, the reality hits home only after the ink is dry on a contract that's hundreds of pages long, all while their house is on the line. They discover the freedom they were promised was an illusion, replaced by a rigid system of control. The partnership they were sold reveals itself to be a one-way street, designed to ensure the franchisor, the parent company, is always guaranteed its cut. That steady flow of royalties and fees gets collected no matter what, completely indifferent to whether the franchisee's store is thriving, struggling, or sinking into oblivion. In Australia, this model is a colossal industry, generating a staggering $174 billion in sales every year with nearly 94,000 franchise stores across the country. Australia has one of the most developed and saturated markets on the planet, and yet, time and time again, parliamentary inquiries and media investigations uncover a trail of devastation. People who poured their life savings into these systems end up financially wrecked, emotionally shattered, and completely powerless to save the business they thought they owned. So, how does a system that sounds so good go so horribly wrong? Let's start with the fallen titans of the Australian food court, Gloria Jeans and Michelle's Patisserie. For decades, these two were royalty. Every shopping centre had them, with Gloria Jeans being the undisputed king of food court coffee, the go-to for a caramel latte drowned in whipped cream. Michelle's, on the other hand, was the emergency stop for a last-minute birthday cake you could pass off as homemade. Both brands were iconic, and they both sat under the umbrella of a single, once mighty company. Retail Food Group, or RFG. These guys weren't just in the coffee and cake business. They also owned shopping center staples like Donut King, Brumby's Bakery, Crust Pizza, and more. If it had icing, carbs, or caffeine, RFG probably tried to buy it. From the outside, their strategy looked like genius. But the brutal truth of RFG's model is that their success had little to do with making great food or keeping their brands modern. The real engine of their growth was the constant sale of more franchises. Rather than being treated as partners on a shared journey, franchisees in RFG's world were simply the entry point into a financial pipeline held captive within the system. Every stage of that pipeline was designed to siphon money upwards. The initial franchise fee was huge, an immediate payout for RFG. The weekly royalties were a never-ending tax on revenue, completely indifferent to a franchisee's struggle to make a profit. And the most powerful tool of all was the mandatory supply chain. By forcing every franchisee to buy all their products directly from RFG at inflated prices, they created a perfect, inescapable system of extraction, cash extraction. The system was a perfect, self-fueling machine for RFG, but it was a nightmare for the people on the ground. This all came to a head in late 2017 with the explosive Cup of Sorrow investigation by The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. It peeled back the curtain, and what it revealed was horrifying. Franchisees were trapped in a cycle of debt, working 80-hour weeks and still unable to pay themselves a living wage. They were locked into long-term leases they couldn't escape and forced to pay hefty marketing fees for campaigns that never seemed to materialize. The damage this caused at the store level was immense. As reported in a powerful investigation by A Current Affair, Michelle's franchisees saw their sales fall off a cliff after RFG forced them to switch from fresh to frozen products. They allege they had to sell smaller, lower quality cakes at higher prices, with some stock even arriving broken or crushed. The human toll of this model is gut-wrenching. The report also detailed the story of a former King's Cross police officer who had bought into the franchise dream. He once lived in a 4-bedroom home with his partner, but after his business failed under the RFG system, his relationship broke down, he was left drowning in almost $500,000 worth of debt, and was forced to live in a shack in remote New South Wales bushland, a place that didn't even have a toilet. But the article also highlighted the story of Julia, a woman who bought a Donut King with her husband after being shown what she claimed were incorrect financials from RFG. Once they were running the store, they discovered the store had been running at a loss of $100,000 a year. They eventually had to shut up shop, with the bank taking their family home. But perhaps the most damning indictment of RFG's culture comes from someone who saw the devastation from the inside. Elk Meyer, a former debt collector for the company, blew the whistle to 9 News. A former police officer who had worked in child abuse and undercover drug squads, Meyer admitted she was no bleeding heart. Yet, she described her time at RFG so harrowing it repeatedly brought her to tears. She described it as a revolving door of trauma. She recalled one phone call where a female franchisee told her her husband was contemplating suicide so they could use the insurance money to pay off their debt to RFG. Maya immediately reported the desperate situation to her boss, but when she followed up a week later, the franchisee told her no one from RFG had offered support. Their only contact had been another demand for their outstanding franchise fees. Maya said she repeatedly warned executives that the business model was unethical and that it would crash, but her warnings were completely ignored. She left the company in disgust, horrified by a system that wasn't just failing its people, but was utterly indifferent to the human misery it was creating. Ultimately, the story of Retail Food Group is a textbook example of what happens when a franchisor stops seeing its franchisees as partners and instead views them as a disposable resource to fuel corporate growth. The combination of a captive supply chain, relentless fees, and a complete disregard for the human toll created a system that was destined to implode, leaving a trail of financial and personal ruin. RFG became the poster child for the dark side of franchising in Australia, but as we'll see, they were far from the only ones playing this dangerous game. Nando's is one of those rare food chains with genuine global cult status. In the UK, it's a cultural touchstone, a rite of passage. In South Africa, it's a national treasure, and in Australia, it used to be a juggernaut. At its peak, Nando's had over 270 stores across the country, serving up its famous flame-grilled peri-peri chicken to legions of fans. But today, Nando's Australia is a ghost, a shell of its former self. And the reason is a business model built on corporate overreach. The biggest controversy, the one that sparked legal battles and public outrage, was the strategy of forced store refurbishments. Multiple franchisees came forward with claims that head office was demanding they perform incredibly expensive upgrades, sometimes on stores that were only a few years old. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in sudden mandatory capital expenditure. This placed hard-working franchisees, who had followed every rule, in a brutal dilemma. They were faced with a sudden demand so costly it could bankrupt them, with the constant threat of termination hanging over their heads if they refused. The move functioned as a psychological tool, creating a climate of fear and reinforcing who was ultimately in control. In what can only be described as a squeeze play, some franchisees alleged that after their agreements were terminated for non-compliance, head office would then conveniently offer to purchase their fully fitted store at a heavily discounted price. Any semblance of partnership evaporated, leaving franchisees feeling like they were facing a hostile takeover of their own investment. They were allegedly bullied into an impossible choice: go broke trying to keep up with corporate demands, or walk away with nothing. Any attempt to fight back became a classic David and Goliath battle, pitting a small business owner's savings against a massive corporate legal team. Take the real-life story of Melbourne mum Christina Wu, who ran a highly successful Nando's store for over a decade. Her business was turning over $1.3 million a year and was valued at more than $1 million. But when her license came up for renewal, Nando's demanded she spend hundreds of thousands on renovations. When she asked for a written guarantee that her license would be renewed if she spent the money, they refused. Soon after, they informed her they weren't renewing her agreement at all. For her $1 million business, Nando's offered her just $50,000, leaving her with no other option but to accept the tiny payout and lose her life's work. These weren't isolated incidents. Legal cases were filed alleging breach of contract and unconscionable conduct. A clear pattern seemed to emerge where franchisees were being financially pressured into a corner. By 2019, the damage was done. More than 1 in 5 Nando's stores in Australia had closed. And then came COVID, which acted as the final accelerant on a fire that was already burning. Nando's brand experience was built around the dine-in vibe. It was a destination, a place to sit and eat, which made it fundamentally unprepared for a world of lockdowns. With a glaring lack of drive-thrus and a takeaway system that felt like an afterthought, their core business model was essentially switched off overnight. Meanwhile, their competitors were perfectly positioned to thrive. KFC, with its decades-old drive-thru infrastructure, was practically built for a pandemic. Newer players, like Guzman y Gomez, designed from day one for fast takeaway and seamless delivery app integration, simply had to turn up the volume on their existing model. Their existing models gave them a massive advantage, allowing them to skip the painful pivot and focus entirely on scaling up to meet the surge in demand. For Nando's franchisees, many already financially crippled by the internal conflicts and refurbishment demands, the pandemic was a death blow. They were trapped in expensive dine-in leases with no customers, trying to manage a clunky takeaway process that was never their focus. The brand, already weakened and distrusted by its own operators, simply limped along. More stores were shut for good, their national footprint shrank dramatically, and Nando's all but vanished from the public conversation. Today, the brand in Australia just doesn't feel the same. The stores technically exist, but the buzz, the energy, and the trust that once defined them are all gone. But the franchising woes that plagued RFG and Nando's are far from unique. The same patterns of pressure, financial ruin, and human despair echo across a huge range of Australian brands, proving that the problem is systemic. Food Co., the owner of Muffin Break and Jamaica Blue, also came under fire for allegedly crushing its franchisees. Consider the story of Maggie Shu, a Jamaica Blue franchisee who told the parliamentary inquiry she lost 40% of her sales after Food Co. opened a new Muffin Break right near her store. But the nightmare didn't end there. When her lease was up, Food Co. not only refused to renew it, but they also allegedly blocked her from selling the business she had built. She was forced to walk away with nothing and was then hit with a $43,000 bill to defit the store she was no longer allowed to operate. Or look at the convenience store giant 7-Eleven. An explosive investigation revealed a massive systemic wage theft scandal leading to a landmark class action lawsuit. The business model was allegedly so demanding with such high fees and low margins that franchisees felt their only path to survival was to chronically underpay their workers. This crisis ultimately forced the company to settle the class action for a staggering $98 million. The same story of a system squeezing franchisees was found at Domino's Pizza, where even the company's star operators turned against them. Fred White was a 20-year veteran franchisee, once publicly praised by the CEO of Domino's Australia as an amazing asset. By 2020, he was suing the company for millions. His lawsuit alleged that the famous $5 pizza strategy destroyed franchisee profits, that he was forced to buy ingredients at inflated prices, and that the company engaged in fortressing, opening a new store so close to his that it cannibalized his sales, all while the CEO took home a staggering $36.84 million in 1 year. From coffee and chicken to pizza and convenience stores, the evidence is overwhelming. These stories prove that the problem runs deeper than just a few bad apples. They're symptoms of a systematic disease woven deep into the fabric of Australian franchising. The entire model is built on a fundamental and deliberately crafted power imbalance. On one side, you have an individual or a couple, often first-time entrepreneurs, pouring their life savings and the equity from their family home into a single dream. They're emotionally and financially all in, trusting the system to be fair. On the other side stands a massive corporation with a legion of lawyers and decades of experience. The franchisor sells the illusion of being your own boss, while in reality, the franchisee is left with almost no autonomy. They are saddled with all the financial risk, the day-to-day pressure, and the debt, while the franchisor dictates nearly every aspect of the business. This structure creates a perfect win-win scenario for the parent company. If a store thrives, they collect their percentage. If it collapses, they've already banked the initial fee and are free to sell the location to the next hopeful franchisee, revealing the relationship to be less of a partnership and more of a financial pipeline. In 2018, a massive parliamentary inquiry dug into the sector. Its final report, published in 2019, Fairness in Franchising, was damning. It uncovered widespread exploitation, predatory contracts, and systemic failings. It made sweeping recommendations for reform, but years later, many argue that not enough has changed. The franchising code of conduct, the supposed rulebook for the industry, is often criticized as being toothless. While it forces franchisors to disclose the terms of their agreements, it does little to regulate whether those terms are actually fair. A franchisor can legally include predatory clauses in their contract as long as it's buried somewhere in a disclosure document that's hundreds of pages long, legitimizing the very power imbalance it's supposed to prevent. Furthermore, while the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission has taken action against some franchisors, the penalties are often seen as a cost of doing business for a billion-dollar company rather than a genuine deterrent. The system remains heavily skewed in favor of the entity with more power and more money. And with every shuttered franchise, there's a human story. Someone who took out a loan against their house. Someone who poured their family's future into a brand they trusted. Someone who believed in the system. Their failure is the predictable outcome of a business model that thrives on hope and feeds on collapse. But what do you think? Have you worked at a franchise, owned one, or know someone who's lived through this nightmare? Drop your stories in the comments section below. We'd love to hear them. And if you found this deep dive interesting, give it a like, hit subscribe, and tap that bell for more stories from the strange world of business, branding, and the systems we all live in, whether we realize it or not. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, stay curious.